When my own children tried to declare me incompetent to steal my ranch, I let them. Then I bought every debt they owed and made them work it off under my roof. They wanted my money, but what they got was a lesson written in ice law and bloodline. The wind howled across the Montana plains, whipping curtains of snow against the windows of a small wooden farmhouse. Inside, Maggie Doyle, 68, sat alone at her kitchen table, the same one she'd shared morning coffee with her late husband for 30 years. A mug of steam rose beside a stack of unpaid vet bills and a small Powerball ticket pinned under a salt shaker. The television murmured from across the room, just background noise, until she heard it. Tonight's winning numbers are 14, 23, 31. Her spoon froze midair. She leaned forward, lips trembling. One by one, the numbers matched. All 6. For a moment, the farmhouse was silent, except for the ticking clock and her shallow breathing. The ticket slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the floor. $312 million. Maggie's wrinkled hands covered her face, a sound between laughter and disbelief escaping her. Tears blurred her vision. Then quiet determination. She picked up the ticket and pinned it back to the refrigerator door right under a photo of her grandson Eli, riding her old chestnut mare. "Not yet," she whispered. "They'll show me who they really are." Outside, the storm thickened. But inside, a plan began to form, one that would test love, loyalty, and greed, the kind of test only a mother could design. The next morning, the blizzard had eased, leaving the ranch blanketed in white silence. Maggie stirred her coffee, staring at the phone on the counter. Her reflection in the dark window looked older than she remembered, tired but sharp. She scrolled to Ryan Doyle, her eldest. His number had a little heart icon she'd added years ago, back when he still called her Mama. She took a breath and pressed call. "Hey, Mom," his voice came through, brisk, distracted. "Morning, son. I hate to ask, but the vet says Duke needs his heart meds again. They've gone up. I'm short this month." There was a pause, a long one filled with faint keyboard clacks in the background. Then Ryan sighed. "Mom, you've got to stop doing this. You can't keep spending money on those animals. You're retired. Live within your means. Maybe it's time to sell the ranch. It's too much for you alone." Her fingers tightened around the cup. "This house was your father's dream," she whispered. "Dreams don't pay bills, Mom. You're lucky to have a roof. I'll check in next week." The line clicked dead. Maggie sat frozen, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Her coffee had gone cold, a dark reflection of her son's tone. She glanced again at the winning ticket pinned beside Eli's photo. The faintest smile touched her lips, not from joy, but resolve. Test 1 failed. Snow still covered the fences like white lace when Maggie dialed her daughter's number. Melissa, always polished, always proper. The kind of woman who never wore the same coat twice and called her mother only when she needed a little help with the mortgage. The call connected. "Mom, hi?" Melissa's voice was bright, sugary. "Everything okay out there in the frozen wilderness?" Maggie smiled faintly. "Just fine, honey. Except my heart pills are getting too pricey again. I was wondering if you could help me just until my next check clears." There was silence, then a soft, careful laugh. "Oh, Mom, you really shouldn't be worrying about money at your age. You know Ryan and I were actually talking about this. There's a lovely senior community near Billings' private rooms, nurses, even social events. You'd love it." "So, you can't help me with the medicine?" "Oh, Mom," Melissa's tone cooled. "You've got to start planning smarter. Selling the ranch would give you security. And freedom. Isn't that what you want, freedom?" The word stung. "I'll think about it," Maggie said quietly. "Good, I'll send you a brochure." "Love you, Mom," click. The call ended before Maggie could reply. She looked at the phone, then at the window, her own reflection staring back through frost. On the fridge, the ticket still gleamed beneath the magnet shaped like a horseshoe. "Test 2, she whispered, voice steady now. Also failed. By dusk, the snowstorm had returned thick and merciless, the kind of Montana night that silenced everything but the wind. Maggie sat by the fire, her hands trembling slightly, as she scrolled to the last name on her list, Eli Doyle, her grandson. She hesitated. The boy was only 21, juggling classes and a part-time job at a campus bookstore, but she needed to know. Would kindness skip a generation or survive it? The phone rang twice. Grandma. Hey. You okay? His voice came bright, sincere, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Maggie swallowed the lump in her throat. I hate to bother you, sweetheart. I'm running low on my heart medication, and the ranch bills are stacking up. I'll be fine, I just needed... How much do you need? He cut in gently. I've got $500 in savings. It's not much, but I can send it tonight. Or better yet, I'll drive up this weekend. Are you feeling all right? You sound tired. Her lips trembled. You'd drive 300 miles in a blizzard for me? Of course I would. You're my grandma. You think a little snow's gonna stop me? He laughed softly. Besides, Duke probably misses me. Maggie covered her mouth, tears spilling freely now. Oh, Eli, you keep your money. Just promise you'll be careful on the road. I will. But I'm coming anyway. When the call ended, she sat perfectly still, the sound of the storm filling the house again. Then slowly, she rose and walked to the window. Beyond the frost, the barn light glowed faintly, a fragile beacon in the dark. Test 3, she whispered, smiling through tears. Passed with flying colors. Outside, wind carved ghostly paths through the snow, but inside, something warm began to thaw the quiet certainty that love still lived in at least one corner of her bloodline. Headlights cut through the storm like two trembling stars. The old Ford pickup rolled up the long, snowy drive tires, crunching over ice. Eli stepped out into the wind wrapped in his faded college jacket, breath misting in the cold. Grandma, he called, half shouting over the gusts. Maggie opened the door before he reached the porch, pulling him into a tight hug. For the first time in weeks, she felt warmth that didn't come from the fire. Good Lord, you actually came. Of course I did, he said, grinning. And Duke nearly froze out there. We gotta fix those pipes. They worked side by side that night, two silhouettes against the storm. Eli's laughter filled the old barn as he thawed the frozen line with a heat gun. When the water finally flowed again, he whooped in triumph. Maggie chuckled softly, covering her heart as if steadying it. Later in the kitchen, Eli ladled hot soup into 2 chipped bowls. You really should let me set up automatic bill pay for you, Grandma, he said. Or get someone to help. Oh, I'm getting help, she said quietly, eyes glinting. Just not the kind you mean. He tilted his head. You okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. Better than I've been in a long time. When Eli went to bed in the guest room, Maggie sat alone by the fire, the crackle echoing her heartbeat. She pulled a worn notebook from a drawer inside, were handwritten. Notes, numbers, and names: Ryan, Melissa, Duke's vet, Attorney Harper. The next morning, under a pale sun, Maggie drove her pickup into Bozeman, the same truck she'd had since the Clinton years. She walked into Harper and Reed law offices, her boots tracking melted snow across the polished floor. Mrs. Doyle, the secretary, said kindly, Mr. Harper's expecting you. Inside the office, she laid her Powerball ticket on his desk. I'd like to set up something airtight, she said. A living trust, and a video statement confirming my mental capacity. Mr. Harper nodded, eyes widening slightly at the numbers. Understood. Anything else? Yes, she replied. I'll need a private investigator. Someone discreet. My children may soon start planning things that aren't theirs to plan. He studied her face, strong, deliberate eyes clear as the mountain sky. You're preparing for a storm, Mrs. Doyle. She smiled thinly. The blizzard outside. That one I can handle. It's the one inside my family that needs taming. Saturday brought the winter fair to the small town of Paradise Valley, a swirl of music, laughter, and the smell of caramel apples carried through the frozen air. Children slid across the ice rink, while ranchers in heavy coats traded jokes over thermoses of coffee. Maggie arrived in her old Ford Eli riding shotgun. The boy's cheeks were red from the cold, his smile easy, But Maggie's mind wasn't on the fair. Her lawyer's words from yesterday echoed, "The trust is locked, but your heirs may still try to move faster than the law." "Come on, Grandma," Eli said, taking her arm. "You used to win the pie contest every year. You can't chicken out now." She chuckled, letting him lead her toward the booth where the judges sat. For a brief moment, it almost felt like old times. Then across the street, near the realtor's tent, she saw Ryan. Her son stood in a sharp wool coat, speaking to a tall man in a charcoal suit, Mason Craig, the developer who'd been buying up local farmland for a luxury ski resort. Ryan's posture was nervous but eager, his gloved hands gesturing toward something unseen. Eli noticed her go still. "Grandma? What's wrong? Stay here, sweetheart," she murmured, slipping away through the crowd. She approached just close enough to hear. Ryan's voice was low but urgent. "The old place is over 100 acres. Perfect elevation natural creek. My mom's, well, her health's not what it used to be. We're arranging guardianship soon. Once that's in place, selling won't be an issue." Maggie's heart went still. Guardianship. Selling. Her own son's words drifted through the crisp winter air like poison. Craig nodded. "If you can secure her signature or medical proof, my firm will handle the rest. Developers from Denver are ready to bid." Ryan forced a laugh. "Oh, you'll have it soon enough." Eli's voice startled her from behind. "Grandma, they said you dropped your scarf." He froze mid-sentence when he saw Ryan across the street, shaking hands with Craig. Ryan noticed them too, and his smile faltered. "Mom? Eli didn't see you there." Maggie's lips curved into a faint, unreadable smile. Clearly, Craig excused himself politely, leaving Ryan to fumble for excuses. "That guy, he's just a client from the bank. Small talk you know about my land," she asked softly. Ryan's jaw clenched. "Mom, I'm just trying to help. You can't manage that property forever. It's worth more than you realize. You could retire, live comfortably?" "I am comfortable," she interrupted, eyes steady as the frost. "More than you think." Eli watched the exchange in silence, his breath visible in the cold. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, then forced a smile. "Anyway, we'll talk later. I promised Melissa I'd meet her." He hurried off toward his car boots crunching over the snow. When he was gone, Eli exhaled. What was that about? He looked guilty. Maggie slipped her scarf back around her neck, gaze distant. Some people smile before they steal. It's a trick older than winter. Back at the pie booth, the fair music played on cheerful, oblivious. But for Maggie, the melody had turned bitter. She felt the paper of the winning ticket folded inside her coat pocket like a secret heartbeat. She looked at Eli, who was helping a child pick up a fallen candy apple, his kindness, effortless, real. Then her eyes drifted to the hills beyond town, where the snow shimmered gold under the setting sun. In that glow, she whispered, "They think I'm weak. Let's see how they handle strength." The fair's laughter faded behind her as she turned toward her truck, the sound of distant hoofbeats echoing across the frozen valley, steady, rhythmic, foretelling the coming storm. Sunday evening settled over the ranch like a heavy blanket. The sky was bruised purple snow still clinging to the fences, and smoke curled from the chimney into the cold twilight. Maggie set the table stew, simmering cornbread warm, 3 plates laid out. She hadn't invited them, yet Ryan and Melissa showed up anyway, driving in together. Their headlights cut across the yard, twin beams slicing through the snow. Mom Melissa called cheerfully as she stepped in, brushing flakes from her designer coat. "We brought dessert." Ryan followed, carrying a store-bought pie. "Thought we'd surprise you." Maggie smiled faintly. "You did." Eli was already home from fixing the barn's heater. He stood at the counter, arms crossed, quiet but alert. He didn't trust their timing. Neither did Maggie. They ate in silence for a while, forks scraping plates, fire crackling. Melissa was the first to break the quiet. "Mom, Ryan and I have been talking. We're worried about you being alone out here." "I manage fine," Maggie said calmly. "I know, but the weather's harsh, and well, we think it's time you let us help. Financially, legally. We could set up power of attorney just in case." Ryan nodded. "It's just a precaution, Mom. You'd still have control, but we could handle the big stuff. Taxes, insurance, maybe even selling the property?" Maggie's tone sliced clean through the room. Ryan froze. Melissa's spoon clinked against her bowl. No one said that. Eli leaned forward, voice tight. Actually, Uncle Ryan, you kinda did. Yesterday, at the fair. Ryan shot him a warning look. You misunderstood. I heard enough to understand, Eli said quietly. The fire popped loud, echoing through the tense air. Maggie set her spoon down her gaze, moving slowly from son to daughter. When your father was alive, she began softly. This ranch was built with his hands and mine. Not for profit, not for show, but for family. Mom Melissa tried to smile. We are family. That's why we're here. Maggie's eyes narrowed just a little. No. You're here because you think I can't see what you're doing. Silence. Even the clock seemed to pause. Eli shifted his jaw tight. Ryan looked away. Melissa blinked too fast. Finally, Maggie stood her chair, scraping the floor. Eat your pie, then go home. I have things to take care of. Ryan's voice hardened. Mom, this attitude isn't helping anyone. She looked at him for a long, cold moment. Then she smiled, small, knowing dangerous. Oh, it's helping me just fine, she said softly. Because now, I see you both clearly. Night fell early in Montana that Monday. The storm returned like a living thing wind, screaming through pine branches, snow whirling in ghostly ribbons. The ranch lights flickered as Maggie finished feeding Duke in the barn. The air smelled of hay and iron, heavy with the coming freeze. Across the field, a pair of headlights appeared and crept up the long drive. It was Melissa's SUV. Strange she hadn't called. Mom, she shouted cheerily when Maggie stepped outside, wrapping her scarf tighter. I brought you some groceries. But there was something off about her tone, too bright, too rehearsed. And behind her car window, Maggie thought she saw a red, blinking light. Melissa followed her into the barn, pulling off her gloves. You really shouldn't be out here alone in this weather. What if you fall? You could break a hip and no one would even know. I've handled worse winters than this, Maggie said, setting down the feed bucket. But thank you for your concern. Melissa smiled, thin and fake. Just thinking of your safety, Mom. Her phone in her pocket was already recording. Outside, Eli's truck rolled up headlights, cutting through the snow. He was coming back from the mechanic, dropping off tools he'd borrowed. When he saw Melissa's SUV parked by the barn, he frowned. Inside, the wind picked up. Duke neighed nervously. Maggie turned to calm him. When the barn door slammed half shut from the gust, Melissa flinched, dramatically stumbling backward. Careful, Maggie said. But Melissa didn't just stumble. She reached out, shoved a loose bale toward Maggie's feet, and in that second, Maggie slipped on the icy plank. Her cane fell, her body pitched forward. The camera in Melissa's pocket caught every frame. Mom. Melissa gasped in exaggerated horror, rushing halfway, then freezing phone, angled perfectly toward the old woman on the ground. But before she could stage the next line of her act, Eli burst in. What the hell are you doing? He ran to Maggie, lifting her up before she hit the hard beam. Are you hurt? Maggie winced, but shook her head. No, I'm fine. Just startled. Eli turned eyes narrowing at his aunt. Why were you recording? Melissa stammered. I wasn't just filming Duke for insurance. Insurance. Eli stepped closer, his breath steaming in the cold air. You tried to make her look weak. Her voice cracked, desperation leaking through the mask. You don't understand Ryan and I. She's losing control of the property. Someone has to step in. She's not losing control, Eli snapped. She's losing patience. The barn door banged open again, Sheriff Harlan flashlight in hand. The old rancher's neighbor had seen Melissa's car and come to check. His voice was gravel and wind. What's going on here? Eli straightened. Melissa tried to make Grandma fall, recorded it. Melissa's face drained of color. That's ridiculous. Why would I? Harlan's beam caught the faint red light still blinking in her coat pocket. Ma'am, hand me that phone. She hesitated. Now. Melissa handed it over. Harlan played the last seconds of the recording, her fake gasp, the shove Eli's voice shouting. The sheriff's jaw tightened. I see, he said. You're lucky she didn't crack her skull. This'll go in my report. Melissa tried to laugh, brittle and empty. Come on, Sheriff, it was an accident. Harlan turned to Maggie. You want to press charges, ma'am? Maggie stood tall, brushing hay off her coat. Not yet. But keep that video safe. Might come in handy later. Harlan nodded. I'll file it under precaution. As his car lights faded into the snow, Melissa's mask slipped. You think this changes anything, she hissed. Ryan and I are still your family. Maggie met her daughter's eyes, the storm reflecting in them. Family helps you up when you fall, she said quietly. Not the ones who push first. Melissa's lip quivered, and for a fleeting second, guilt flashed across her face, but it vanished just as quickly, replaced by cold resentment. She turned and stormed toward her car tires, spinning on the ice. Eli helped Maggie back toward the house. The wind howled behind them, lifting her words into the night. Grandma, he said softly, you really don't need to deal with them anymore. Oh, I'll deal with them, Maggie whispered, glancing toward the glowing barn. But this time, on my terms. Inside the house, she sat at her desk and opened her notebook again, this time, writing a single line in bold ink. Everything they do from now on, I'll see. Outside, the snow kept falling white and endless, covering every footprint, every trace, except the truth, now captured forever in a single recording. 3 days after the barn incident, the sky finally cleared. Snow still blanketed the valley, but the storm had moved on, leaving behind a brittle, silent calm. Maggie sat by her kitchen window, sipping tea as a pickup truck pulled into the drive. A man in a gray parka stepped out, boots crunching the snow. He carried a sealed envelope stamped with the name Harper and Reed Associates. Morning, ma'am, he said, handing it to her. Delivery from your investigator. Said it was urgent. Maggie thanked him and waited until the truck disappeared down the road. Then she broke the seal. Inside were photos, glossy prints of Ryan and Melissa living lives that had nothing to do with struggle. Ryan smiling over a new Harley Davidson, the receipt showing a $28,000 loan. Melissa, wrapped in a spa robe, champagne flute in hand, time-stamped from last week's self-care retreat. Attached were credit reports, overdue notices, and a column labeled Unpaid Debts to M. Doyle totaling $58,000. She set the papers down and let out a small, humorless laugh. Champagne taste on a coffee budget, she murmured. From the drawer, she pulled her old leather checkbook, not to write checks, but to record something else. Her pen scratched across the page. Step 1, purchase their debts. Step 2, change the lender. She called Mr. Harper's office. Tell our investigator he did fine work, she said. Now I want you to contact every creditor listed in that report. The lawyer hesitated. You mean to settle them? Oh, no, Maggie said evenly, a ghost of a smile forming. To buy them, every last one. She heard him pause on the other end, then a quiet chuckle of admiration. Mrs. Doyle, you've got steel in your veins. Not steel, she replied. Memory. After the call, Maggie looked around the quiet kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd taught her children to read, to pray, to say thank you. Now the room felt like a courtroom, every silent object bearing witness. She pinned another note to her refrigerator door beneath the winning ticket. They owe me lessons, not money. That night, Eli came in from stacking firewood. Grandma, you okay? He asked, noticing the papers on the table. Better than okay, she said, folding them into a folder marked trust documentation. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud, Eli. It's properly notarized. He grinned, though a flicker of concern crossed his face. Whatever you're planning, just promise it won't get you hurt. Maggie smiled faintly. Oh, darling, this isn't war. It's accounting. Outside, the valley glittered under a cold moon. Somewhere out there, her children were sleeping soundly, unaware that by sunrise, their debts, their secrets would belong to the one person they'd tried to underestimate the most. By Friday morning, the letters had gone out. Each envelope bore the same neat handwriting and a wax seal in deep crimson M. Doyle Holdings and Trust. Ryan received his first. He was in his office at the local bank, coffee steaming, when his assistant slid it across the desk. Personal delivery, sir. No return address. He opened it absently, then froze. Notice of debt transfer. Dear Mr. Doyle, please be advised that your outstanding accounts, including Harley-Davidson Finance First Union Credit and Sunpeak Visa, have been purchased in full by your new creditor, Margaret E. Doyle Trust. Payment in full is due within 30 days at 24% interest. His hands trembled. The paper rustled like dry leaves. What kind of sick joke? He whispered. Across town, Melissa opened an identical envelope in her kitchen. Her manicure gleamed against the paper as she read the same signature, her mother's. Her wineglass slipped and shattered on the tile. By noon, both arrived at the ranch together, their anger burning hotter than the snow outside. Eli was in the barn when he heard the shouting. Mom Ryan stormed into the kitchen, waving the letter. What the hell is this? Exactly what it says, Maggie replied, evenly stirring her tea. Your debts are now my property. Melissa slammed hers on the counter. You can't buy our debt. That's insane. It's legal, Maggie said. Every dollar I ever loaned you is now documented and secured. Consider this my way of keeping our family business close to home. Ryan laughed bitterly. You think this makes you powerful? This makes you cruel. No, she said softly. This makes me informed, Melissa's voice cracked. You're punishing us because we didn't send you money for your pills. Maggie finally looked up, eyes cold but steady. No, darling. I'm teaching you what it feels like to owe more than love can repay. Eli stepped into the doorway, tense but silent. Ryan threw his letter on the table. Fine. You want repayment? You'll get it. We'll pay every penny and never speak to you again. Maggie smiled faintly. You'll find that difficult. At your new interest rate, that should take a lifetime. Melissa gasped. You set 24%? It's what your credit cards charged me for years, Maggie replied. Fair's fair. For a long, frozen moment, no one spoke. The fire hissed, the old clock ticked. Outside, snow slid from the roof like a sigh. Ryan finally muttered, You're out of your mind, and turned for the door. Maggie's voice followed him, calm as ever. Maybe, but my mind still balances a checkbook better than yours. The screen door slammed behind them. Silence returned, thick, heavy, triumphant. Eli walked closer, half stunned. Grandma, you really bought their debts. She nodded. If they won't respect love, they'll learn to respect interest. He shook his head slowly, a reluctant grin tugging at his lips. You're scary when you're calm. Good, she said, setting her cup down. Let them hear the quiet before the storm. It's the most expensive sound in the world. The wind had quieted, but the tension inside the Doyle ranch was sharper than any blizzard. The week after Maggie's debt letters, neither Ryan nor Melissa called. That silence, she knew, was never peace, it was plotting. Late one evening, Eli came in from the barn, brushing straw from his jacket. Grandma, I fixed the heater line in the tack room, but your printer's acting up. Keeps flashing red. Maggie smiled faintly. It's old like me. What were you printing? Eli scratched his head. Nothing. But something weird popped up when I turned it on. An email draft looked like Ryan's name in the sender line. Maggie's brow furrowed. Show me. He guided her to the small desk by the window, where the ancient desktop hummed. On the screen glowed a message she hadn't written. From Ryan Doyle. Sunbank Finance. Come to Mason Craig Developments, Denver Real Estate. As discussed, my mother's property can be evaluated next week. The land title is under her name, but I'm moving forward with guardianship. Once I'm appointed trustee, I can authorize the sale. Asking price, $2.4 million. At the bottom, Ryan had even attached a survey map of the ranch with Maggie's initials typed neatly beside current owner. Eli clenched his jaw. He's trying to sell it before anything's even legal. Maggie's eyes stayed fixed on the screen, cold and unreadable. Oh, it's legal enough to hang him with. She pressed print. The machine groaned and spat out the page's evidence as crisp as the winter air outside. She placed them gently into her trust folder between the investigator's report and the debt receipts. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the soft crackle of the fire and the quiet hum of the old computer. Finally, Eli whispered, What are you going to do? She looked at him calm, but fierce. What I always do, sweetheart. I'll wait until they think I'm too weak to fight back. Then I'll let the law do my talking. Outside, snowflakes drifted lazily across the fields, settling on the fence posts like ghosts. The ranch looked peaceful again, but under that peace, something darker moved a mother's plan, sharpening itself into justice. Before bed, Maggie sat at her desk and wrote a single line at the bottom of her ledger. Step 3, expose intentions before the court does. She placed Ryan's printed email on top of the stack and smiled. He's forgotten who taught him to read contracts, she murmured. In the hallway, Eli paused at her door, watching her silhouette against the lamplight, stoic, small, unstoppable. The storm outside had calmed, but in that old Montana farmhouse, another one was gathering strength. The following Thursday, the snow had softened into a white calm over Paradise Valley. The roads were slick, the sky overcast, but Maggie Doyle drove her old Ford into town anyway. She had an appointment and a reckoning. Inside Harper and Reed law offices, the smell of pine polish and old paper filled the air. Mr. Harper, her attorney, rose from behind his mahogany desk as she entered. Mrs. Doyle, he said warmly, you're right on time. I've finalized your living trust. Maggie nodded, brushing the snow from her shoulders. Let's read it together. I'd like to make sure every word is exactly where I mean it. He adjusted his glasses and opened the folder. Per your request, the document contains a special provision we're calling it the kindness clause. He began to read aloud, his voice even professional. Upon the death or incapacitation of the grantor, all assets, including property cash and investments, shall be distributed based on prior acts of care, compassion, and moral responsibility demonstrated toward the grantor during her lifetime. He paused, glancing up. In plain terms, only those who showed love without expectation are eligible to inherit. Maggie smiled. And who decides what qualifies? According to the evidence you've provided, the phone recordings, the investigator's logs, the financial history, it's already decided. He turned the page, revealing the list of heirs. Eli Doyle, sole qualified beneficiary. There was a long, satisfying silence. Then she exhaled slowly. Perfect. But outside the office door, muffled voices echoed, rising, angry. The secretary peeked in nervously. Mrs. Doyle? Your children are here. They said it's urgent. Maggie's expression didn't change. Send them in. Ryan burst through, first red-faced Melissa right behind him. What the hell are you doing, Mom? Ryan barked. We just got a call that you're meeting with lawyers about trust restructuring. Are you cutting us out? Sit down, she said evenly. We're not sitting, Melissa snapped. You've gone too far. Buying our debts. Now. This Mr. Harper stepped forward calmly. If you'd like, I can clarify the document. Ryan cut him off. You can clarify nothing. She's not of sound mind. She's being manipulated by who? Maggie asked softly. The lawyer I've known since you were in high school, or the grandson who still calls me every Sunday? Ryan opened his mouth, but no words came. Melissa crossed her arms. You can't just decide who deserves your estate, Mom. That's not how family works. Maggie's eyes met hers, sharp, steady, unblinking. On the contrary, dear, that's exactly how it works. The law simply helps me put it in writing. Mr. Harper closed the folder gently. Mrs. Doyle's decisions are fully documented and notarized. Unless you can prove coercion or incompetence, which you cannot, it stands. Ryan's voice lowered, trembling with anger. You're doing this because we didn't give you money for your meds. You're punishing us. No, Maggie said quietly. I'm rewarding the one person who didn't ask what was in it for him. Eli stepped into the doorway. Then he'd arrived just in time, his jacket dusted with snow. Grandma. She smiled softly. It's all right, sweetheart. I was just explaining how kindness works when lawyers are watching. Ryan turned to Eli, his tone dripping with resentment. Congratulations, kid. You must be proud tricking your grandmother into cutting her own children out. Eli's eyes flashed. I didn't trick anyone. I just answered the phone when she called. Melissa slammed her purse shut. This isn't over. Oh, it's just beginning, Maggie said, her voice gentle but final. As they stormed out, Harper leaned toward her and murmured, You know they'll retaliate, right? Maggie nodded. I'm counting on it. Outside through the frosted window, she watched her son and daughter arguing in the parking lot, two figures swallowed by falling snow. Then she turned to Eli and said almost to herself, "Love shouldn't have to be tested. But when it fails, you'd better make sure the grade is permanent." That night, the ranch was quiet, except for the fire crackling in the stone hearth. The storm outside had died down, leaving the world wrapped in white stillness. Maggie sat in her favorite chair, wrapped in her husband's old flannel blanket. Across from her, Eli sat cross-legged on the rug, sipping cocoa, eyes reflecting the glow of the flames. "Grandma," he said softly, "were you scared today? At the lawyers?" She smiled faintly. "Not scared, no. I've lived through worse storms. I buried your grandfather when I was 42, raised 2 children while working double shifts at the diner. Fear and we've had coffee together." Eli's eyes glistened. "I wish Dad had been more like you." Maggie reached over, resting a wrinkled hand on his shoulder. "Your father was like me once, before money whispered louder than love." The fire popped. Shadows danced across the wooden walls, flickering over family photos, their faces frozen in happier years. She looked at him, then her voice low but steady. "Promise me something, Eli. If the day ever comes when this place is yours, don't let it harden you. Land can feed people or it can starve souls. Depends on who holds it." He nodded, voice breaking. "I won't leave Grandma. Not while you're here." Her eyes softened, tears catching the firelight. "Good boy," she whispered. "That's all I ever wanted, someone who stays." Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft, almost forgiving. The storm came without warning. By dusk, the wind was a roar, rattling windows, tearing at roof shingles. The world outside vanished in white. Eli had just finished feeding the horses when a hollow crack echoed through the valley, the old barn roof groaning under the weight of snow. "Grandma," he shouted, bursting into the house, snow melting off his jacket. "The north beam's splitting. If the roof goes, the horses—" Maggie was already pulling on her coat. "Get the lanterns," she ordered. "We're not losing them." The two ran through the storm, fighting gusts that burned their faces raw. Lantern light swung wildly as they reached the barn, the wooden doors slamming against their hinges. Inside, Duke reared in panic, eyes wide with fear. Snow had punched through a gap in the roof, scattering straw across the floor. Eli grabbed the ladder. "I'll reinforce from the top. Just keep them calm." But before he could climb, headlights cut through the blizzard, a sleek black SUV pulling up the drive. Ryan. He stepped out, coat-pressed camera light glowing in his hand. "Perfect timing," he muttered, pressing record. "Just show how bad it's gotten. This'll prove she can't live alone anymore." Ryan, Maggie shouted through the wind. "Get inside and help." He ignored her, filming the collapsing rafters. "It's not safe, Mom." That's the point, Eli yelled from above, hammering nails into the splintered beam. Uncle Ryan put the damn phone down, but Ryan only backed farther, narrating over the storm. Elderly woman risking life and property, clear sign of impaired judgment. Then came the crack, deep and sharp like a gunshot. The roof beam gave way. Eli slipped the ladder, jolting. Maggie screamed his name, diving forward just in time to grab his wrist as half the hayloft collapsed beside them. Lantern glass shattered. Sparks flew, catching dry straw. "Eli," Maggie gasped, her boots sliding in the snow and debris. She pulled with all the strength left in her arms. Ryan finally dropped his phone, frozen. "Oh my God! Don't just stand there," she cried. Something in him broke, maybe the sight of her frail frame straining against the chaos, and he rushed in, catching Eli's shoulder. Together, they dragged him down as the last of the roof caved, snow and dust cascading like thunder. The flames sputtered out in the wet, leaving only steam and the sound of 3 hearts pounding in the dark. Outside, another set of headlights pierced the snow. Sheriff Harlan's patrol truck. He ran up, hand shielding his face from the wind. "Everyone all right?" Eli coughed, pulling himself up. "We're fine. Roof's gone, but we're fine." The sheriff's flashlight swung toward Ryan's phone, half buried in straw, the screen still glowing. He picked it up, replayed the video, the shaky footage of Ryan filming instead of helping his voice cold the moment Maggie slipped. Harlan's expression hardened. "You filming this for fun, son?" Ryan swallowed. "For documentation?" he stammered. She's not. Not what the sheriff interrupted. Not capable. She just saved her grandson while you were auditioning for a lawsuit. Ryan looked away, face pale, breath steaming. Harlan turned to Maggie. "You need to report this, ma'am. The guardianship talk's getting ugly around town. People are saying things." "I know," she said quietly, "but let them talk. I have evidence that speaks louder than gossip." She pointed to the ruined phone in his hand. "That'll do for a start." Eli, still shaken, looked at her. "You almost got crushed, Grandma." Maggie smiled weakly, brushing snow from his hair. "If I had at least, I'd have gone down protecting something worth it." Harlan exhaled, looking around the wrecked barn. "I'll file the report, but you need repairs fast. You'll have help." She nodded, glancing toward Ryan, whose guilt was written plain as daylight. "Oh, yes," she said evenly. "I'll make sure he works off every nail." The sheriff tipped his hat. "Good. You've got more grit than half this county combined." Then he left tires spinning back into the storm. Ryan stood in silence, eyes on the floor. "I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt," he muttered. "I know," Maggie said softly. "You never mean it, son. That's the problem." She turned away, her silhouette framed by the broken barn door's lantern glow, haloing her silver hair like firelight. As the storm howled over the valley, Ryan stood alone, amid the wreckage, his own phone now damning proof of how far he'd fallen. Maggie walked back to the house beside Eli, arm linked with his. "Tomorrow," she said, voice calm, steady we rebuild. But not just the barn. Outside, the snow buried the past inch by inch, while the wind whispered through the fences like a verdict. There's no shelter for the ungrateful. The old Grange Hall stood in the center of town, like a relic from another century, creaky floors, brass lamps, the faint smell of cedar and paper. But that morning, it had the hum of something dangerous. The snow had barely melted, yet word had spread fast. Ryan and Melissa Doyle were taking their mother to court. Inside, half the town had shown up. Ranchers, clerks, even the mayor sat quietly in the back, pretending they weren't there to watch blood turn to business. At the front table, Ryan adjusted his tie, his face pale but determined. Melissa dabbed her eyes with a tissue she didn't need. Their lawyer, a young man from Billings, straightened his briefcase and cleared his throat. "Your Honor," he began, "we're seeking temporary guardianship over Mrs. Margaret Doyle, citing diminished capacity endangerment to self and property and evidence of unstable financial behavior." The judge, Eleanor Briggs, looked over her glasses. "That's a serious claim." "Do you have evidence?" Ryan nodded eagerly. "Yes, ma'am. Recordings and testimony that she's taken reckless actions, including nearly burning down her barn and giving away property to a college kid who manipulates her." The door creaked open. Heads turned. Maggie Doyle entered slowly, wearing her best navy coat and the silver brooch her late husband once gave her. Beside her walked Mr. Harper, carrying a thick folder, and Eli standing tall, eyes unflinching. "Sorry for the delay," Harper said smoothly. "We were gathering the rest of the evidence." Melissa's smile vanished. Judge Briggs gestured to the defense table. "Mrs. Doyle, you're entitled to representation. Proceed." Harper opened the folder and laid out 3 neatly bound reports. First, the medical evaluations. 3 independent doctors, 1 psychiatrist. Each confirms my client is of sound mind and full mental capacity. He placed them down, one by one. Second, a certified video statement recorded last week, in which Mrs. Doyle outlines her estate decisions. Calm, coherent, and under oath. The opposing lawyer shifted uncomfortably. And third, Harper continued lifting a USB drive between his fingers. Footage from her son's phone, retrieved from Sheriff Harlan's evidence locker. Ryan's color drained. "You can't, oh, but I can," Harper said, inserting it into the courtroom screen. The video played. Ryan filming the collapsing barn, his voice detached, criticizing his mother's judgment while she risked her life saving her grandson. The gasps from the audience were audible. When the clip ended, silence fell heavy. Judge Briggs leaned forward. Mr. Doyle, would you like to explain why you were recording instead of helping Ryan's mouth opened, then closed? No sound came out. Melissa stood abruptly. This isn't fair. She's manipulating everyone. The judge slammed her gavel once. Enough. This court does not punish competency, Mrs. Doyle. It protects it. Her voice softened as she turned to Maggie. You may be older, ma'am, but I see no sign of incompetence. Petition denied. The room erupted in murmurs. Ryan's face went slack. Melissa sat back hard, and Eli exhaled for the first time all morning. Maggie stood meeting her children's eyes with calm finality. You wanted guardianship, she said quietly. You've just proven why you'll never deserve it. As she walked out, the onlookers rose instinctively, not in pity, but in respect. For the first time in a long while, everyone in Paradise Valley saw who the real Doyle matriarch still was. The next morning, the snow had stopped, but the storm hadn't left the Doyle family. Word of the failed guardianship hearing spread through town like wildfire. By noon, Judge Briggs had reconvened, not because she had to, but because Maggie Doyle's lawyer had new evidence. The Grange Hall was packed again. Ryan and Melissa looked drawn brittle like porcelain about to crack. Harper stood calm as ever. Your Honor, as part of yesterday's hearing, the court reviewed video evidence of neglect and manipulation. Today we submit audio recordings confirming intent collected legally by my client's investigator. Ryan shot up. This is harassment. Sit down, Mr. Doyle. Judge Briggs said sharply, let's hear it. Harper pressed play. The speaker hissed, then came Ryan's voice low and impatient. She's old Mel. If we get her declared incompetent, the land's ours. The bank will cover the sale. We could clear our debts by spring. Then Melissa's laugh brittle and cruel. And if she fights it, we'll tell everyone she's losing it. That fall in the barn was a gift. The recording ended. The silence that followed was deafening. Gasps rippled through the room. Even the judge's pen stopped midair. Ryan's face drained of color. That's edited. She's framing us. Harper didn't flinch. The investigator verified metadata and timestamps. It's authentic. You plotted to declare your mother unfit for financial gain. That's fraud. That's coercion. And it's a betrayal so deep no document could forgive it. Melissa buried her face in her hands. Ryan turned toward Maggie, but she was already standing. Her voice was steady quiet, but it filled the room. I gave you life. You gave me paperwork. Mom, please no, she cut in. Don't call me that right now. You didn't lose a mother today. You lost the right to have one. Judge Briggs rapped her gavel once her tone solemn. This court will forward the recording to the county prosecutor for review. The petitioner's claims are dismissed with prejudice. Mrs. Doyle, the law stands on your side. As the gavel struck again, Maggie turned to Eli, her eyes wet but fierce. You see, sweetheart, she whispered. Sometimes the truth doesn't need a sword, just a microphone. Eli smiled faintly, his hand finding hers. Ryan stood frozen, unable to meet her gaze. Melissa sobbed quietly, the sound small, hollow. Maggie straightened her coat and walked out through the sea of murmuring townspeople. Each step echoed slow, deliberate, victorious. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in weeks. The snow glittered like shards of glass, and the wind carried her final words back into the hall. I raised them to know right from wrong. I just never imagined I'd have to prove it in court. 2 days after the hearing, 2 envelopes left Maggie Doyle's mailbox addressed in her elegant cursive to Ryan Doyle and to Melissa Doyle. No emotion, no return address. Inside each a single letter. No greetings, no goodbyes, just a verdict. You have 30 days to repay your total balance or work it off at the ranch. Ryan Carpentry. Stall repair bookkeeping. Melissa animal care kitchen and bookkeeping. All hours logged, must be honest, witnessed, and signed. Failure to comply will result in formal collection procedures and public notice of debt default. At the bottom, her signature Margaret E. Doyle, crisp as winter glass. Ryan read his on his office lunch break. His hands shook so hard, his coffee spilled. Melissa found hers wedged in her condo door, the paper nearly tearing in her grip. Both called that night. Neither reached her. Maggie sat by the fire phone, buzzing across the table. She didn't answer. Instead, she whispered to the empty room. They wanted power. Let them learn, work first. Outside, the snow fell again, slow and deliberate, as if the valley itself approved of the justice written in ink. Sunday morning sunlight spilled through the stained glass windows of the old wooden church. Dust floated in gold ribbons above the pews. The small congregation had gathered quietly, neighbors, friends, even the sheriff curious but respectful. At the front, Mr. Harper unfolded a single sheet of paper. Maggie sat in the first row, Eli beside her, hands clasped. Ryan and Melissa stood in the back, pale, silent. Harper began to read. Per the living trust of Margaret Doyle, all assets, including property accounts and holdings, shall pass to Eli Doyle grandson in recognition of selfless care, loyalty, and moral integrity. He paused. Ryan and Melissa Doyle are to retain no financial claim until all debts owed to the Doyle Trust are repaid in full through documented labor benefiting the local community. A murmur rippled through the pews. Ryan's face flushed crimson. Melissa's eyes filled with tears. Maggie rose, slowly turning toward them. This isn't punishment, she said softly. It's a path. If you want your inheritance, earn it the way I did, with hands, not words. Eli looked at her, proud and shaken all at once. The bell tolled outside, long and low, echoing through the valley, not as a funeral, but as a rebirth of justice. Within a week, the whole valley knew. The Paradise Gazette ran the headline in bold, "The mother who tested her children and found one worth keeping." People read it in diners at the feed store outside the post office. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others nodded quietly, almost proud. For the first time in years, Maggie Doyle's name wasn't whispered with pity. It was spoken with respect. Sheriff Harlan stopped by her gate one afternoon, leaning against his truck. Heard Ryan's working dawn till dark down at the co-op, he said. Fixing fences, hauling feed. The boys got blisters the size of quarters. Maggie smiled faintly. That's good. Payne's a teacher. Money never could be. And Melissa? The sheriff asked. She's at the shelter, Maggie replied. Feeding animals, scrubbing kennels. First time in her life she's cleaned up after something that couldn't thank her. Harlan chuckled, then tipped his hat. You're something else, Mrs. Doyle. When he left, Maggie walked to the porch, where Eli was mending a saddle strap. He looked up, smiling gently. You think they'll ever forgive you, Grandma? She paused. The wind carried the smell of hay and melting snow. Maybe, she said, but forgiveness isn't the point. Understanding is. She sat beside him, watching the hills gleam under the late sun. When you love people too much, you start rescuing them from the consequences they need most. I finally stopped. Eli nodded, slowly, eyes misty. They'll come around, maybe, she murmured. Until then, we keep building. Down the road, Ryan's truck rumbled past beds stacked with fence posts. He lifted a hand in silent acknowledgement before turning away. Melissa followed on foot a few minutes later, pushing a cart of feed, head bowed, but working. Maggie watched them disappear into the gold light. That's all I ever wanted, she whispered, to see them try. The sun dipped behind the ridge, painting the sky in fire and forgiveness. In that fading light, justice didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like peace. Spring came early that year. The snow melted into clear streams that ran through the fields, carrying the last traces of winter away. Maggie stood at the fence line beside Eli, watching the new sign he'd just hung, Kindness Ridge Ranch letters, carved clean into cedar sunlight, glinting off each edge. It suits us, Eli said quietly. It suits the land, Maggie corrected with a soft smile. It's always been kinder than the people living on it. Behind them, workers from the Doyle Kindness Foundation, students, ranchers, and volunteers fixed fences and tended to rescued horses. The small nonprofit Maggie and Eli founded was already changing lives feed programs for the elderly scholarships, for agricultural students care grants for abandoned pets. Across the field, Ryan's truck idled near the barn. He didn't come close, just waved once before driving off. Melissa came later, carrying a tray of muffins, leaving them on the porch without knocking. Maggie noticed both gestures. The waved the muffins and said nothing. Eli watched her smiling. "You're letting them back in, aren't you?" She chuckled. "I never locked the door, sweetheart. I just changed the terms." The wind picked up gentle now, rustling through the pines. Maggie rested her hand on the fence post, feeling the warmth of the wood. Let them work. Let them learn. And maybe one day they'll understand what the sign really means. Eli nodded. "Kindness with conditions." "Exactly," she said, eyes gleaming. "The only kind that lasts." Morning light spilled across the valley, warm and golden. The snow had melted into soft earth and the air smelled of pine and rain. Eli opened the paddock gates, whistling low as the horses trotted out manes, glinting in the sun hooves, drumming against the thawed ground. From the porch, Maggie Doyle watched, wrapped in her shawl. The breeze tugged at her silver hair, carrying the scent of hay and promise. On her lap lay a letter, her last one, addressed to Ryan and Melissa. The ink was steady, deliberate. "Children, I never wanted revenge, only reflection. Money can build walls or bridges, you chose the first. But bridges can still be crossed even late. The ranch is open if you return in love, not in need." She folded it gently and placed it in the mailbox herself, smiling at the sunrise. Eli came up from the field, his boots muddy, his grin wide. "They're free again," he said, meaning the horses. "So are we?" Maggie replied softly. They stood together looking toward the blue ridgeline where winter had once ruled. The light caught the sign by the gate. Kindness Ridge shining like gold against the green. Maggie whispered almost to the wind, "Money can't buy love." But it surely showed me the price of greed. The breeze carried her words across the open valley, and for the first time in a long, hard winter, peace finally stayed. How did this story touch you? Share your feelings in the comments and give it a rating from 1 to 10. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, then tap the bell icon so you'll always stay updated. And don't forget, click on the end screen to watch more heartfelt videos waiting for you. See you soon.